Hi everyone, and welcome to the second Genius Hour project for my Myth and Modern Culture class. Today I'll be talking about the mythic inspirations that went into the iconic 90s anime Sailor Moon, accompanied by a speed paint that I made recreating the painting Endymion and Diana. There are many different motifs used in the show inspired by Greek, Roman, and Japanese mythology, but in this video I'll be focusing mainly on its Greek influences. Sit back, relax, and let me guide you through my info dump about myths and anime. In Greek mythology, it's widely known that the goddess Artemis is the goddess of the moon, which is correct, but she's part of the Olympian pantheon led by Zeus, and was born after the end of the Titanomachy, the war between the Titans and the Olympians long after the Titan pantheon led by Kronos was defeated, as detailed in Hesiod's work The Theogony, written around 725 to 675 BCE. Before Artemis was born, there was another goddess of the moon, and that was Selene. Selene was a Titan, daughter of Thea and Hyperion, and sister to Helios, the sun god, and Eos, the goddess of dawn. There aren't very many stories about Selene, but one of the most well-known one was about her romance with the mortal Endymion. The myth about Selene and Endymion didn't come into popularity until about 1 CE, with some allusions in earlier myths like Jason's voyage in the Argonautica, written in 4 BCE. There are many different versions that exist of the myth. Endymion's occupation ranged anywhere from a shepherd to a hunter, astronomer, and even a king, and the location that it takes place in could either be in Elis, Caria, or Mount Latmos. In one version, Endymion is the founder of the Greek city Elis, and he's noted to be a beautiful ruler. One day, Zeus tells Endymion when and how he's going to die. Naturally, he wanted to make sure that the throne and the kingdom would be well taken care of, so he traveled to Olympia with his sons and had them race each other for the throne, which is something that adds an interesting connection to the modern-day Olympics. A more hybrid version of the story has Endymion as a hunter, shepherd, or astronomer, and Selene falls in love with him. His jobs in this version are pretty interchangeable. Zeus, after being begged by Selene to make Endymion immortal, goes to him and makes him choose his own destiny. Endymion got two choices, to either stay immortal or go into an eternal sleep. He ends up choosing the latter. The version that's closest and most likely inspired Sailor Moon is as follows. Endymion is a shepherd in Caria who lives in a cave at Mount Latmos and tends to his flocks every night. Some versions tie in his royal lineage by telling how Endymion used to be royalty in Elis, and left the throne for one reason or another and became a shepherd. While tending to his sheep at night, he gazes up at the moon, and she gazes back. Selene notices the man whose beauty rivaled Narcissus and Ganymede, and falls in love with him. She visits him in his cave in the mountain every night, but she soon realizes that, as an ageless being, she would outlive Endymion, and have to watch him wither and die. She goes to Zeus and begs to make her lover immortal, and he agrees, but there would be a cost. With the help of the god of sleep, Hypnos, Zeus puts Endymion into an ageless, eternal sleep, where Selene can visit him in his dreams. Regardless of Endymion's incapacitated state, Selene isn't bothered and proceeds to have 50 daughters with him. A ridiculous number, I know, but each daughter is supposed to signify each lunar month, and more specifically, the 50 months between each Olympic Games, which is actually another neat link to both the race in Olympia from one version in the myth and the Olympic Games. Another thing that I'd like to make note of before moving on is the connection between this myth and the Pygmalion and Galatea myth. In the Greek myth Pygmalion and Galatea, Pygmalion is a talented sculptor and makes a beautiful marble statue of a woman. Through various methods, depending on the interpretation, Aphrodite gives the statue life and they get married. With Selene and Endymion's myth, the opposite happens. Selene falls in love with Endymion and she pleads to Zeus to give him immortality and puts him into an eternal sleep to be admired forever, basically making Endymion on par with an inanimate object. Again, I don't think there was ever a specific connection between the two myths when they were made and popularized. I just thought the two stories had some interesting similarities. For those of you who don't already know, Sailor Moon was originally a manga created by Naoko Takeuchi in 1991, and it was later adapted into an anime a year later in 1992. animated by Toei Animations, and it ran for a total of 200 episodes, spanning across 5 seasons and 3 movies. It quickly gained popularity, and the story of a magical girl alongside her friends who beat up monsters became known all over the world. Now, there can be some confusion when talking about the anime's deeper lore, as the Sailor Moon and Sailor Scouts we all know and love are actually modern day, or modern in the 90s, reincarnations of the original Sailor Scouts and Princess Serenity, who lived thousands of years in the past. Not to mention the myriad of different kingdoms and same-faced and even same-named characters that live in 2 or more different time periods. For example, there's Princess Serenity, who lived in the past, and Neo-Queen Serenity, who lived during the 30th century. They're very similar, but they're 2 completely different characters, I promise. I'm going to try to attempt to give the briefest and clearest summary I can, but as there's a lot to cover and a lot of moving pieces, it might get a bit confusing. Now, a long time ago, there was a kingdom on the moon, ruled by Queen Serenity, who's essentially a moon goddess, and her daughter, Princess Serenity, another divine being. Each of the planets in the solar system had their own kingdoms and princesses alike, and the princesses from the planets Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, and Venus were the ones who became the first Sailor Scouts, and Princess Serenity's protectors and closest friends. The Earth also had their own monarchy and their own prince of the Golden Kingdom, Prince Endymion. Princess Serenity was fascinated by the Earth, and despite her mother forbidding her from visiting the planet, she would frequently go in secret, where she met and eventually fell in love with Prince Endymion. Unbeknownst to Serenity, Endymion, and the others, there were dark forces brewing under the surface. They called themselves the Dark Kingdom, and it was ruled by Queen Metalia. She was planning on overthrowing the Moon Kingdom, Queen Serenity, the Golden Kingdom, and everyone else, and aimed to unleash the power of the Dark Kingdom upon the entire universe. Queen Beryl, someone who worked directly under Queen Metalia, managed to seduce and brainwash armies of humans from Earth, including Prince Endymion's 4 personal guards and closest friends. The group has a name, but I'm kind of unsure of how to pronounce it, so here it is. Utilizing her overwhelming power and large armies, she successfully toppled the Golden, Moon, and Planet Kingdoms, killing millions, including the Sailor Scouts and Prince Endymion, who all fought valiantly but futilely against their previous allies to protect Princess Serenity. Endymion's death was made possible by Queen Metalia imbuing the prince with her dark energy, so much so that it became impossible for him to be healed, even by the Silver Crystal, one of the single most powerful magical artifacts in the entire galaxy, capable of feats like reviving an entire world and all of its inhabitants from death and ruin. The crystal's inability to save Prince Endymion was the ultimate tragedy for Princess Serenity, and overcome with grief, she committed suicide. Out of desperation after the death of her daughter, Queen Serenity used the Silver Crystal to defeat and seal Queen Beryl, Queen Metalia, and the Dark Kingdom away, as well as send her daughter, the prince, and all of the Sailor Scouts to be reincarnated in the future on Earth, as the incarnations we see in the show. Soon after, the queen died due to using the last of her powers and the Silver Crystal's powerful drawbacks. To try to sum it up in less words, Princess Serenity lived in the Moon Kingdom on the moon, and she fell in love with Prince Endymion from the Earth's Golden Kingdom. Their relationship was star-crossed, literally and figuratively. The Dark Kingdom, led by Queen Beryl, who was empowered by Queen Metalia, brainwashed thousands of humans and invaded the moon and the Golden Kingdom. Many people died. Queen Metalia puts enough dark energy in Prince Endymion to kill him and prevent the Silver Crystal from healing or resurrecting him, and Princess Serenity kills herself out of grief. Queen Serenity, the princess's mother, uses the Silver Crystal to have the main characters reincarnated on Earth in the future, and that's who we see in the show, taking place in the 1990s. I'm sure after all that info, it might be a bit hard to see how the 2 stories are connected. And while the endings are vastly different, the setups and the characters actually line up pretty well. In Sailor Moon, Princess Serenity is Selene, a deity with connections to the moon that visits Earth and falls in love with a beautiful man named Endymion. Endymion's name is the same in both stories, and his royalty in the show may be derived from the Greek myths' depictions of Endymion as a king. Their love is doomed to fail, and Endymion either goes into an eternal sleep or dies. Both stories may still end in a bit of hope, where some Greek interpretations say that Selene can visit Endymion in his dreams. And, of course, in Sailor Moon, they get reincarnated. They get to meet and fall in love all over again. So at this point, you may be wondering what's going on with the visuals in this video and how it relates to everything I just talked about. Well, what I'm working on in the background is a recreation of one of the paintings my Myth and Modern Culture class saw on our field trip to the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. More specifically, it's inspired by the 1753 painting made by
Jean-Honoré Fragonard.
Yeah, that guy. If anybody wants to take a shot at pronouncing that name, here it is. The title of the painting, Diana and Endymion, dictates that it's the Roman interpretation of the myth, with the goddess Diana instead of Selene, descending from the heavens to visit her sleeping lover Endymion. There's also a cherub in between them, which is a type of figure frequently seen in Greek and Roman art pieces to physically signify the presence of romantic love. Next to Endymion, there's also several sheep, a shepherd's crook or staff, and a herding dog lying next to him, depicting his shepherd occupation in many myths. The piece itself is very peaceful and ethereal, and I was really lucky to be able to see it in person. When my class and I went to visit the museum, I had already planned out my Genius Hour project to be about the Greek myth and Sailor Moon, but after seeing the painting in person, I just knew I had to incorporate it into this project in some kind of way. I replaced Diana with Princess Serenity, Endymion with Prince Endymion, and various other aspects of the original painting with things from the anime. One of my favorite details is how the cherub got turned into Chibiusa, who's the daughter of a version of Princess Serenity and Prince Endymion. Technically speaking, she's the daughter of Neo-Queen Serenity and King Endymion from the future in the 30th century. But she was just such a good fit, I had to include her, as she's a physical symbol of their love, like the cherub in the original painting. I didn't change the sheep, but the dog got turned into the cats from the anime, Luna and Artemis. As the loyal animal companions they are to the Sailor Scouts, I thought it would be fitting to have them in the piece. At first, as you can see, I just included Luna, the black cat, because she was Sailor Moon's animal companion, but I got a suggestion from a friend to include Artemis as well. Having the reference to the Greek goddess Artemis just fit way too well to ignore. I also had a really fun time making the piece. It was really fascinating to study the original painting, and I tried to emulate the mood of the original piece through the posing of the figures, the lighting, and other details. I also tried my best to mimic the look of the anime in the figures themselves, and I tried to merge the two very different styles of both the painting and the show together. It took a couple of sketches and way more layout drafts than I initially thought, but I did it. In the span of a couple of weeks, a combined recording length of a bit over 18.5 hours, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, the most daunting part of this project was complete. I know I just threw a lot of information at you, but I hope it made some sense in the end. Here's all of the sources I used in getting this project together, and I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did in making it. Thank you everyone for watching, and have a great summer.